Hi, I'm Paul Jermain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. As you know, if you watched the show before, we cover a variety of topics from man overboard to insurance. And the primary idea is to give you some information that will allow you to make smarter decisions and have more fun in the water. But every now and then we take a little side trip down to a place where I think you might find interesting, and that's the case today. We're at the Antique Boat Museum in Clayton, New York, and we're joined by the director, Rebecca Hopfinger, who's going to tell us a little about the museum. Rebecca?
Hi, Paul. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Very neat museum here, lots and lots of boats. Can you tell us a little bit about the background of the museum, how it got started and why, and what goes on here today?
Sure. So the museum is actually celebrating its 50th birthday as a museum this year, and it really started by a group of enthusiastic boat owners. Starting out as a boat show, someone wanting to sort of show off their new restoration, and evolving into a little auxiliary, which was a branch from our local museum here in town. And we've developed now into this world-class nautical museum that you see today.
Right. And you've got acres of facilities, right?
And fortunately, we're right on the waterfront. So we have a beautiful facility and campus that we're able to showcase all of these boats.
And are there certain key events or exhibits that happen at any particular time of the year?
We have exhibits throughout the summer season, so we're open mid-May through mid-October. And we have one of the oldest continuous running boat shows in the States.
Wow.
Yeah, first weekend in August.
Okay, all right, I'll make a note of that. And I'm gonna get going because there's a lot of neat boats here to shoot, so I want to record those and then do some explanations with one of your experts. Yes. Well, Bo, you've spent a lot of time in the boat restoration business over the years, and this is a particularly interesting boat here at the museum. It's a Fitzgerald and Lee, 1937.
Right, Paul. This is a pretty interesting boat. Fitzgerald and Lee was one of the smaller builders that came out of the Alexandria Bay area. It's pretty interesting history in that Fitzgerald and Lee and Hutchinson shared employees, and the employees would work for one for a while and then the other. But Fitzgerald and Lee was tied together pretty closely with John Hacker. So John Hacker did a lot of designs, and the Fitzgerald and Lee Corporation built them. And this was one of John Hacker's, early forays into rolled covering boards, rounded corners. Footloose and Fancy Free was a really well-recognized boat in the Thousand Islands. It ran a big V12 engine for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was it Scripps?
Scripps V12, right? It was 300 plus horsepower.
Wow.
But it was one of the early sort of streamlined boats, and it had a barrel-back transom, so the chines or the shear lines disappeared into the curve of the transom.
Oh, nice.
And Fitzgerald Lee was a great builder, and they really had a good reputation as far as high quality.
Oh, they did. And a local boat up there, Alexandria Bay. This was another interesting boat. This is is it T-Bolt, a 25-foot T-Bolt, 1929.
Yeah, a real obscure builder by my thinking.
Yes.
But T-Bow built some number of boats in the Thousand Islands, so this has a long history of being on the river in the Thousand Islands. It was donated to the museum quite some time ago.
Now this had some interesting aspects in terms of the styling was like runabout-like, but the hull shape was displacement.
Yeah, in the Thousand Islands, they hung on to their round-bottom boats long after most builders had converted to V-bottom.
Okay, they enjoyed the smooth ride of it, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think the weather conditions or water conditions in the Thousand Islands lent themselves to the round-bottom construction, and I think tradition was that round bottom was the boat of the Thousand Island.
Right.
But this is a runabout deck configuration with a round bottom underbelly.
And the cedar planks on this again, so that's again a lot of the local boats use cedar as opposed to mahogany, right?
It was the local wood for sure. But this belies its age. It has components that were older than the 1929 build era of this boat.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the museums, I should be fortunate to get this because this is the only T-bow I've ever seen.
Very rare.
Yeah, particularly so.
Another museum find. You won't see this anyplace else.
You won't see it on the water, that's for sure.
Going to a museum like the
Yeah, only
ABM
here.
is doing it up
Only here.
in Clayton, yeah. Now this is an interesting boat built by the Indian Lake Boat Company, 26-foot Dart, built in 1926.
Yeah.
They made, I think they got involved with canoes and rowboats originally, right?
Well, they built all kinds of small boats initially, and then, you know, I actually think they're most famously known for their runabouts.
Oh, okay.
But it was a long-time builder. And then coming out of Ohio, the Indian Lakes became Dart boat building.
Okay.
So everyone sort of understands and knows, oh, the Dart brand.
Right.
But Indian Lakes was its predecessor.
Yes, yes. And that's what that was the company that actually created this boat,
This
right?
is early enough to be in Indian Lakes.
Right. Now they had Scripps power in them?
Probably. From that era, Scripps was one of the engines of choice. But, you know, quite traditional construction. I mean, they were modeled, you know, like the Chris Crafts, and this was another company that said, hey, we can do the same thing, maybe better.
Yeah, yeah.
And the early wooden windshield. I mean,
Yeah, I see that. It's just a single support there, and then it's got the windshield coming on either side. Yeah.
And this one's pretty pure as I look at the dashing. Those are obviously old gauges. That spider spoke hub in the steering wheel is old.
Okay.
And nice touches with the bead between the ceiling planks.
Right,
Just
yeah.
little details that they did. And they rounded the corners of their seating. And I mean, they did a nice job building these boats.
Yeah, it does look nice. And this is a 1939 or so, 26-foot Hutchinson.
Hutchinson, right.
Yeah, sport utility.
Yeah,
Clinker
you know,
built
well,
and bright.
Right, and lap straight construction, which Hutchinson was. Well, they didn't start building their boats that way, but by the 40s they had built a lot of lap straight hulls.
Now that gives you sometimes a little smoother ride in rough water,
Well,
right?
it's softer, yeah,
Yes.
there's no question.
Yeah.
And Hutchinson built a lot of these boats in the 50s, and this is a very early version. So probably important enough to be in the museum. And I particularly like the 26-foot version.
You do?
Because they had lots of room inside.
All right, yeah.
Now, interestingly, look at the bow on this. It has that little, and it doesn't show up, but the roller on the top of the deck. There's a good shot of it.
Okay.
And it's on a slide, and
Yes.
it would slide out. And the
All right.
idea was, when you went out and drift fished in the river,
Yes.
you would drop your anchor rod over the bow,
Right.
and then you could just let your line out because it would go with the current.
Oh, nice.
And this is pretty traditional inside. I mean, these were big, powerful, plush boats.
Yeah.
But original dash panel, original wheel, original controls.
Now, my understanding is that oftentimes they produce a stock platform, but you could get a lot of customization within the boats. Right?
Well, with Hutchinson, every boat was custom built.
Okay.
So they had a standard platform, like you say, but
Different cabinets and bait wells and all
whatever
these
you
different
wanted,
options.
whatever you wanted, they would do for you.
Wow, that's nice.
So, yeah, they are truly custom.
Now, here's a Chris Craft, 28-foot, built in 1929, called the name of the boat is Topper. So this is a sedan.
Right.
Looks to be in really nice shape.
Well, this boat's fully restored.
Fully restored. Okay.
Yeah. Now, not too often, but on occasion, the museum will take a fully restored boat. They really like to have, you know, what I call original constructors work.
Yeah.
But here's a very unusual boat that Chris Craft built. Very few of the sedan top boats lasted.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I don't know what happened through the course of time, but they all disappeared. There's very few of these in existence.
Yeah.
And the 28-footer, of course, was the premiere. That was the big one.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is completely. Not only are the passengers protected from the elements, but the helmsman is as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The two front cockpits in the boat are covered. And I mean, some people call them funeral boats because of the black tops, but
it does look a little bit formal. Yeah.
it is pretty formal.
Yeah.
And you can see the hatchway to get in there. You would lift it up and slide it forward.
Oh, I see. Right. At the top there.
And then in the second seat, there would be a little step that would tip out.
Okay.
And you could step down into the hull.
All right. So it's nice. You could go out in all sorts of weather.
Yeah.
Early spring and summer and fall. Really push the season. It's a very pretty boat.
But, well, fully restored, I mean, it's really quite beautiful, and this boat has original power.
Yeah. Now, this boat here was built by Lier Boat Works in 1928. It's a 28-foot. My understanding is...
In 08.
Oh, wait. Oh, okay.
Yes, this
they wanted to go racing, right? Some of the guys wanted to go racing.
It was interesting. The Sportsman's Club of the Thousand Islands all got together, and they hired Lier to build 20 identical boats.
Okay.
And the premise was that now it's going to be skill, not
it's going to be fair.
the boat.
It's going to be a fair race.
Right.
Yeah.
So these were called the Thousand Island number boats because they were numbered 1 through 20.
Okay.
And they're 28 feet long, 5 feet wide. They all had the same engine, and they would, well, part of the deal was that these boats would be serviceable so they could go back and forth to their islands.
Yeah.
And then on the weekends, they could get together and race them and have some fun.
All right. Now, this had a 4-cylinder, I think, in a Gensic?
Gensic, and I've never seen a Gensic engine, probably built in the New York area. But and there's the name tag, but the Air Boat Works.
In New York.
There's 7 of these known to still exist.
Just 7?
Only 7.
Oh, wow.
The museum is lucky to have 2.
Wow.
The 2 that they have were commissioned for George Bolt, who was the head of the Waldorf Astoria hotel chain in New York City.
I see.
And had a big home in the Thousand Islands.
Right. And he had numbers, I think it was 3 and 13. This is 13,
it was
I think
3
the other
and
one was 3.
Right. Right.
All right. Well, this is an interesting launch type boat. It's a 23-foot boat built in 1936 by Bert Wiswell.
Well, you know, this is pretty interesting. This is a late version, but initially, before motorboats, they had rowing skiffs.
Yes.
And if you went fishing in the Thousand Islands as a sportsman, you would hire a guide to take you fishing. And, this is the style of boat that they would row you out to the fishing grounds in.
Okay.
And then with the advent of motors, they turned out the skiff putt. And this was turned, it's a skiff putt. And
why do they call it that?
Well, because the motors were single cylinder and they literally went putt, putt, putt.
Oh, I see, right.
But then you would hire the guide to take you out in one of these. And you could go further afield and catch more fish.
Right.
And Wiswell built a bunch of these.
I think this one he built for his family.
Yes.
And they used it.
Now, the skiff putt really came into vogue in, let's say, 1910 or 12. So by this time, this is from 1930 or 36. So this is a very late one.
Yes. So very well developed.
Yeah. And you sat on the motor box and you steered it with cord with 2 ropes.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Huh?
So and you would sit right there, and there's the shift lever on your left hand.
Yeah.
And you would sit up in the middle, and off you'd go. And they went fairly fast because they were putting Model T engines in these, and they'd run along 16, 18 miles an hour.
Gee, that's not bad.
So,
well, it's pretty comfortable. Now, this boat here is interesting. It was built by the Lindsay Boat Works. It's a 22-foot, built in 1933. And apparently this guy grew up in Maine. And so he got the influence of lobster boats and lobstering. And I think he might have worked for Hershoff for a little bit. And so you start to see that in the lines here, which are a little bit different than some of the freshwater boats.
well, I don't know much about Lindsay Boat Works, but this boat's been at the museum for quite some time. Beautifully built, and it does sort of look a little Maine-ish to me.
Yes, yes, it's got some of the lines that flow that way. And this was used to service wealthy families' camp, I guess, the Van Griff camp originally, the island that they had.
Well, I mean, all of the island people, or island folk as they were called, had launches that would carry all the goods and services and everything they needed out and back and forth to their island.
Yeah, you can see a slightly different shape to the hull here.
Yeah, real round bilge here.
That influence that he carried forward from Maine before.
Yeah, a lobster boat look.
This is interesting. We have a steering wheel up in the forefront there, and then we've got the controls back here.
Yeah, well, so
or maybe is that a handle for
I think that's a steering handle.
Maybe there's 2 places where
right, and the throttle's on the left on the box, and you could control it or steer it from 2 locations.
Right. Oh, okay. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, a beautifully built boat.
Yeah.
It's a nice addition to the museum.
Very nice. And here's an interesting boat. This is a whirlwind molded plywood boat made by that company, 1959. And again, I think people were looking to see how can we make a lightweight boat with no seams so we can reduce the amount of leaks and we can get high performance, right?
Right. They were really experimenting with, this is what they call hot molded boat, because this hull would have been built in an autoclave with wooden veneers, and they would lay up a glue that would basically bond under heat.
Yes.
And they would crush it together or squish it together and form a hull with one pressing. And this type of boat was quite popular in the 50s.
Right, and it makes a very lightweight but strong shell, right?
Very strong, considering.
Yeah.
And you can see the veneers here in the picture running, you know,
Yes.
fore and aft, but from keel to shear line.
Yeah.
And then they would probably have 2 more layers crisscrossing when they molded the hull.
So it's a great way to get away from weight. You see this oftentimes with big sport fishermen that have built down the Carolinas. They're into the molded stuff. Where they
but
put
no frames. I mean, the skin is the structure of these boats.
Isn't that interesting?
It was quite popular in the late 50s.
Yeah, an old outboard there. Now, this is unusual. I don't think you'd see this anyplace other than a museum. This is a 1957 13-foot Lyman that's actually in the original factory shipping crate.
Right. It was built and sold to a dealer, but never used.
Never used.
Yeah.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and Lyman was a very popular boat manufacturer back there. They made, in the 50s apparently, they made 4,000 or 5,000 boats a year.
Right. They made thousands of these.
So there were a lot of these boats going around in crates around the country.
Yeah, but still in its shipping crate.
Yeah.
So this one's never been used, never been in the water, never had a motor in it.
Isn't that remarkable, huh?
Yeah. It is remarkable if you think about it. The dealership closed or went bankrupt before they sold this boat, and it just sat in their warehouse.
Boy, it's in beautiful shape. It's like it got caught in a time capsule.
Yeah. Well, if you want to see how they built it, boy, there's a great way to do it.
Yes. Take some specifications off something. This is the perfect example. Yeah, that's a beauty. Really nice. Well, here's another interesting boat at the museum. It's a 19-foot, built by Mariner Boat Works, 1963. The name is Gentleman Jim. It was a racing boat, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, this was E-class or E-service runabouts. The American Power Boat Association put together, all kinds of different classes for different displacements and lengths and power of boats. But E-service, I believe, was 18 to 19 feet maximum, and a 300 cubic inch motor maximum.
All right.
So the Chris Craft or the General Motors 283 and Ford's 292 were the engines of choice.
Yeah.
And it provided, good speeds and pretty competitive racing.
Those are good motors. And my understanding is this guy, Gentleman Jim, was Jim Harrington, and that he built some boats in the old Hacker factory in Detroit, and for some reason got interested in Garwood's approach to racing, and that's where this the idea for this came from.
Right. Sort of the influence from
the influence from the old masters.
Yeah,
if you will.
exactly.
Yeah.
But this was raced successfully for years and years.
Yeah, this one, I said, won a number of races, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet it looks to me like you could still go use it on a day-to-day basis.
I think that was it.
Runabout.
Yeah.
Well, E-service runabout was for boats that were production boats.
It was.
That you could race.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And back here, this is running a Ford Interceptor, I think. So that would have been what the.
That's the 292, right?
Yep. Well, here's a very popular boat, but there are very few I've seen that are in this condition. This is a 1957 18-foot Lyman utility. So these were built on Lake Erie, right?
Sandusky, Ohio.
Yep. Made for big water.
And they're fabulous big water boats.
Yeah.
I mean, the Lyman ride is sort of, everybody understands that Lymans are a great boat in rough water.
Is that right?
Yeah. They were built out of plywood lap strakes.
Yes.
And you still see a lot of these in the Thousand Islands and on the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
They're still popular. People use them as their everyday boats. They're not particularly expensive, so you can afford to own one of these and actually use it.
Right. And it's a usable design. Even something like you look at the windshield opening up to get some fresh air to the cockpit on a hot day. What a nice feature that just makes it easier to live with the boat.
Yeah, and they had the quick folding tops and ventilated windshields. I mean, just a lot of nice features that made them creature comfortable.
And a soft ride. Now this boat would have had probably a slightly different hull shape than the Hutchinson, right?
Well, similar. I mean,
similar,
they both,
yes, similar.
But Hutchinson used a little different lap.
Yeah.
They used the plywood, and Hutchinson used a mahogany or a cedar plank.
Yeah.
And this is the inboard version, standard wheel. There's the gauge cluster that Lyman used all the way through their production. This probably has a 4-cylinder motor in it, so it's not real fast, but it'd clip along in the high teens, maybe 20 miles an hour.
Yeah.
This one's in beautiful condition.
Yeah, I think this one has a 6 in it, but
does it?
It could have gone either way, right?
Yep.
Either power choice would have been something people would have selected.
A little later they'd have made those.
Yeah. Now this is, you don't see this boat every day. This is a 16-foot Gilbert sailing canoe built in 1924.
Yeah, these are pretty spectacular. This is, believe it or not, they call it a racing canoe, but this was for sailing.
Okay.
So this canoe had a mast step in the forward, which we can see in this picture, and it also had a mast step in the back. So the one person sailing this boat would have to control 2 masts, the rudder, and if you look carefully, you see the plank that runs across. There was a hiking plank as well. So not only were you trying to get yourself outside of the boat to counteract the wind, you're controlling two sets of sails and the rudder.
Wow, that's a lot.
These were really the athlete's version of sailing in 100 years ago.
Must have been pretty fast.
They were fast. The museum used to have some races, back when we first started to go there. They'd actually have a few of these show up.
Yeah.
There's the hiking plank, and then there was another plank that slid over that, so you could get 4 feet outside.
Wow.
And actually put your feet on the gunnel of the boat, completely outside the boat.
Okay. All right.
There's the steering quadrant, and a rod would go through there that you controlled, and there's the rear mount.
Wow. Here's another really interesting boat here. It's an Olympic canoe. It was built in 1948, and this was originally designed for 2-man sprints. It was a lot of things were unusual about, but my understanding is one of them was that it actually won gold when it was competed in the 1948 Olympics.
Right. This boat was a winner.
Yes.
But 2 guys would paddle their hearts out. And I believe they ran 1,000-yard sprints. But it's nice to see one of these in the museum. As much as we think about all of the power boats in the world, there were fabulous, fabulous oar and paddle-driven boats.
Well, that's the thing about the museum too, that it not only has this portfolio of power boats that we just scratched the surface on, but all these rowing craft and rowboats and canoes and all these other type of things too, right?
And these were indigenous to the Thousand Islands region, so it's appropriate that they're in the museum. But you can see all the little ribs. I mean, this is still a nice piece of construction.
Oh, it's beautiful, right? The canoe builders really were craftsmen.
Yeah, everything was just miniature.
Yeah. Had to have a relatively delicate hand there. Now, so as we move from one type of racing to another type of racing, this is a hydroplane built in somewhere in the 50s, between 50 and 59 it's a Swift Hydro. What do we know about those? Those are very popular for racing, right?
Yeah, well, Swift was a premier builder for the hydro world. And this was, let's see, AB class racing, and more than likely they would run the Mercury 10 or 20 horsepower on these, depending on the class.
I see. The driver would sit right there and steer.
And you would kneel. You wouldn't sit. You would actually be on your knees.
Oh, right,
And you had a spring-loaded dead man's throttle, so if you got thrown out of the boat stopped.
The boat stopped,
And the Thousand Islands was very competitive in the racing.
Really?
Dwayne Chalk ran a marina there, and he really inspired all the local kids to go out and race.
Kind of a fun sport without a lot of money involved.
Yeah.
This is a little higher level in the sport, right?
Well, this is Grand Prix. So
this is 1955 waterback right here with a 7-liter called the Chrysler Queen. Now this is a 3-point hydroplane, right?
Correct. 3-point hydro, which was state of the art in the day. Henry Lauterbach was the builder. He owned the industry. He was building a lot of world-class racing boats. I've watched this boat run. It runs 150 to 60 miles an hour.
Is that right?
It's particularly loud. It has the 392, I believe, Chrysler Hemi in it.
Yes, yeah.
And
with about, I think it's a 900 horse or something.
Yeah, 700 to 900 horsepower. I mean, today they've actually worked those Hemis even well beyond that.
Oh, really? Yeah.
But in its day, it was probably in the 700 to 900 horsepower range.
So the 3 points mean it would sit on 2 sponsons and the prop, right?
And in the propeller. The propeller would create just enough lift that it would get the tail end of the boat out of the water.
Yeah.
And it would just have the rudder in, the propeller pushing, and the 2 sponsons in the front. But you can see world's record 168. So
yeah,
going around, that's 168 on an oval, not a straightaway.
Oh, that's a good point.
So
that's a good
you
point.
understand just how fast these would be.
Yeah, in this particular boat, and then you can see how functional the cockpit is. Not a lot of room for extraneous stuff, and then...
no, that seat would hold you tight because you didn't want to be bouncing around while you were driving it.
Not when you're doing an oval, like you just
Exactly.
pointed out. Right, exactly. So, and this boat was a real winner in terms of it won just a number of races.
Yeah, and Buddy Byers, George Byers, was the driver. And he was around when this boat was donated to the museum.
Well, Rebecca, it's hard to believe, but we're out of time for recording the show today, and it's been a great show. A lot of very interesting boats to look at, a lot of interesting histories. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up today?
Well, certainly a big thank you to you, Paul. I really appreciate you coming and sharing what we love so dearly here at the Antique Boat Museum, our collection and our beautiful facility.
Yes.
So I'd encourage people watching your show to come and visit for themselves and check it out.
Yes.
We have additional information on our website, which is abm.org.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Smart Boating viewers, for watching this show. If you'd like to learn more, contact us at our website, www.smartboatingus.com. Thank you.